smoke first, then the heat, close enough to sting. A man stands in the doorway, arms loaded with scrolls, and he cannot make himself move. In front of him, shelf after shelf is glowing black, curling, gone. 1,000 years of writing, and he can only carry what he is already holding. This is the story you think you know. The greatest library that ever existed, lost in a single night. One fire, one catastrophe. The end of an age written in smoke. Everyone knows how it died. There is only one problem with that story. It survived that night. It kept its doors open for more than 400 years after Caesar sailed home. No one burned down the Library of Alexandria. Not in one night, not with one match. It was killed slowly, across centuries, and most of the people who killed it never lit a thing. So what actually destroyed it? To understand what was lost, you have to walk inside it. Well, it was still the most extraordinary building on Earth, so come in. The man with the keys is named Eratosthenes of Cyrene. Around 245 BC, the pharaoh of Egypt puts him in charge of the largest collection of writing the world has ever assembled. The plan behind this place was staggering. Not to gather some of the world's books, all of them, every play, every map, every medical text, every argument anyone had ever bothered to write down, pulled together under a single roof. And they took it seriously. Every ship that tied up in Alexandria was searched, not for gold, for books. Find a scroll, and it went straight to the library to be copied. The library kept the original. You went home with a copy. How many scrolls ended up inside? We genuinely do not know. Ancient writers toss out numbers anywhere from 40,000 to 700,000, and the real figure is lost to time. But take the lowest guess. Even that is more writing than any city on Earth had ever held in one place. And it was never just a warehouse for paper. Beside it stood the Mauseon, where scholars lived and ate and argued for a living, paid by the state to do nothing but think, the first research institution anywhere on the planet. Here is the kind of thing a place like this makes possible. Eratosthenes hears a curious rumor from the south. Down in a town called Syene, at noon on the longest day of the year, the sunlight falls straight to the bottom of a deep well, and nothing casts a shadow at all. So he tries an experiment. Same day, same hour, he pushes a rod upright into the ground in Alexandria, far to the north, and he waits. His rod casts a shadow, a clear one, and on a flat Earth, that shadow simply cannot exist. That shadow hands him an angle, a little over 7 degrees, and a little over 7 degrees is almost exactly 1/50th of a full circle. Sit with that, measure the distance between the two cities, multiply it by 50, and you have measured the whole planet. So he runs the numbers. His figure for the size of the Earth, about 250,000 stadia. Translate that into modern units, and depending on which measuring stick he used, he lands within a few percent of the true value. A man with a rod and a shadow, sitting in a library, weighed the planet. That is what this building was for. Not just to hold what people knew, but to shove it further than anyone believed possible. Hold on to that feeling, because from here on, the story is nothing but loss. The first wound does not come from fire, not an army, not a foreign invader. It comes from a king with a bruised ego. Around 145 BC, King Ptolemy VIII turns on the very scholars his own family had spent generations collecting. He purges them, drives the thinkers of Alexandria out of the city entirely. Now put yourself in the reading hall that year, a young student. You walk in, and the desks where your teachers sat are empty. The scrolls have not moved. Every last one is still on the shelf, but the people who knew how to read them, question them, build on them, gone. Scattered across the sea. And there is the first hard truth about how a library actually dies. A book no one can understand is just decorated paper, lose the minds, and the collection begins dying long before anyone smells smoke. Then, in 48 BC, comes the fire everyone remembers. Caesar is pinned in the harbor, badly outnumbered, and he makes a desperate move. He sets his enemy's own fleet alight. The flames crawl ashore, into the warehouses along the docks. The Roman writer Seneca, quoting an older historian, puts the loss at 40,000 scrolls. That is real. That is a tragedy. But notice where the fire is, down at the waterfront, in storage, not in the heart of the library itself. How do we know the great library lived on? Because decades later, the geographer Strabo walks through Alexandria and describes the Mauseon, still standing, still busy, scholars still bent over their work. The fire wounded it. It did not kill it. The building outlasted the man by centuries. So, the fire is not the ending. The next killer is slower, and it makes a terrible painting. Under Roman rule, the money thins out. The pharaohs who once paid for every last scroll are gone. The patronage dries up, and a research institution starved of funding does not explode. It just quietly shrinks. Then the wars arrive at the door. In 272 AD, the Emperor Aurelian tears into Alexandria to crush a rebellion. The fighting centers on the Bruchion, the royal quarter, the exact neighborhood where the great library stood. The royal quarter is left in ruins, and here is the quiet horror of it. When the smoke clears, not one ancient writer stops to mourn the library. No one records its death, which tells you something cold. By now, there may not have been much left to mourn. A generation on, around 297 AD, the Emperor Diocletian lays siege to Alexandria again. More fire! More rubble! Piece by piece, the collection Eratosthenes once wandered through is being ground down toward nothing. But the story is not finished, because the great library had a child. A second, smaller collection kept on the other side of the city inside a temple set high on a hill. They called it the Serapeum. Picture yourself climbing the steps. Above you rises the vast statue of the god Serapis. On either side, halls that once stood lined with scrolls. For a while, this hilltop temple is the last real home of Greek learning left in the city. But the world beyond the temple walls is shifting fast. Rome has a new faith now, Christianity, and the old gods are no longer something you tolerate. They are targets, and a pagan temple stacked with pagan books sits squarely in the sights. In 391 AD, the Emperor Theodosius outlaws pagan worship altogether. In Alexandria, the Christian patriarch Theophilus leads a mob up that hill. They break into the temple, they haul down the great statue of Serapis, and the Serapeum is torn apart. You want this to be the ending. One villain, one mob, the books roaring up in flame. But be careful. The writers who described that day described the statue, the temple, the blood, and they barely mention a single book. One earlier historian already wrote of the Serapeum's library in the past tense. The shelves, it seems, stood mostly empty long before the mob ever climbed the hill. A few decades later, in 415 AD, a brilliant mathematician named Hypatia is dragged from the streets and killed by a mob. Her death was not really about the library at all. It was city politics turned lethal, but people remember it as the night the light of Alexandria finally went out. Now we come to the most famous ending of them all, the one you have almost certainly heard, the Arab conquest of Egypt, 642 AD. The tale runs like this. The conquering general asks the caliph what to do with the library, and the reply comes back ice cold. If these books agree with the Quran, they are unnecessary. If they disagree, they are dangerous. Either way, burn them. And they say those scrolls fed the city's bathhouse fires for 6 long months. A chilling story. Also, almost certainly invented, because no one writes it down for nearly 600 years after it supposedly happens. It first surfaces in a text from the 13th century, and here is the fatal flaw. By 642 AD, there was no great library left to burn. It had been dead for generations already. So why do we hold on so tightly to these stories? Caesar, the mob, the caliph, because a single fire is easy to hold in your head. It hands you a villain, a date, something to be furious at. The truth offers none of that, and the truth is so much worse. Here is what truly killed the Library of Alexandria. Not one fire, a political purge that emptied it of scholars, kings and emperors who stopped paying the bills, wars that wore the buildings down, one siege at a time, and under all of it, a slow, endless drip of neglect. It was not murdered in a night, it was left to rot for 400 years. So picture it one last time, and this time, it is you. You are the last scholar who still bothers to come. The roof leaks, half the shelves stand bare, no one pays for new copies anymore, and the ones you have are flaking apart in your hands. You turn to tell someone, anyone, and the room is empty. The city has simply forgotten what this place was ever for. And on some ordinary afternoon, someone pulls the door shut for the last time. No fire, no mob, no ending worth painting, just silence. That is how the greatest library in history actually died. And here is the part that should keep you awake. Remember Eratosthenes, the man who measured the earth from a desk inside those walls? When the library faded, his answer faded with it. For well over 1,000 years, Europe simply lost the true size of the earth. So when Christopher Columbus sailed west in 1492, he was working from figures that made the planet far too small. He truly believed Asia was a short hop across the water. He was wrong. Eratosthenes, 17 centuries before him, had been right. And that is only the one idea we can still name. Somewhere in that ocean of scrolls, a thinker had already argued that the Earth circles the sun. 1,800 years before Copernicus dared say it out loud. There were blueprints for machines run on steam, careful maps of the human body. How much of it survived? We do not fully know. That is the whole point. You cannot count what you never got to read. Would saving all of it have changed the world? Would we have reached the stars centuries earlier? Honestly, historians argue over it and no one can prove a thing. But this we know for certain, ideas that once existed simply vanished, and then humanity spent more than 1,000 years slowly and painfully working them out all over again. Which leaves the real lesson, and it has nothing to do with ancient Egypt. Knowledge does not need a bonfire to vanish. It only needs to be forgotten, defunded, handed to people who have decided it no longer matters. The Library of Alexandria did not burn to the ground in one tragic night. It was left to fade, and the world hardly noticed until it was already gone. So maybe the real question is not how they lost their great library. Maybe it is quieter than that, and it is pointed straight at us. What do we know right now, right this minute, that we are quietly letting slip away? Sit with that, and I will see you in the next one.